over $100 million annually in private land conservation, a Republican-led initiative that was expanded under a Democratic governor. Let us not turn our backs on this 30-year partnership. I ask for your support for this common-sense amendment to continue the improvements to America's largest and most historic estuary, as well as our nation's other great waters. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves. The gentleman from Ohio.
Mr. Chairman, I wish to claim time in opposition to the amendment.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
The Connolly amendment says that the underlying bill will not apply to any waters for which federal funding is provided. This would have an effect of realigning federal funding for projects in subject states with waters for which federal funding is provided to greater EPA imposition of federal one-size-fits-all policies. As drafted, the scope of the federal funding intended to be covered under this amendment is unclear, but could be interpreted to be almost limitless in coverage. As a result, this amendment would allow EPA to determine that the amendment applies to virtually all waters, with the consequent effect of nullifying the underlying bill. Rather than nullifying this legislation, I would rather, Mr. Connolly, join those of us who think it would be more productive to ease the burden of unnecessary regulations and provide the states more authority in carrying out the Clean Water Act. I urge all members to oppose the Connolly amendment, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Virginia is recognized for 30 seconds.
I would inquire first of the chair how much time remains.
30 seconds. 30 seconds.
30 seconds. Let me just say to my friend who's managing on the majority side, I spent 14 years in local government. We don't consider the federal involvement in cleaning up the Bay an undue burden. We actually consider it a partnership that has paid off big time, and we need more of it. With that, Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Gentleman yields back. Gentleman from Ohio.
I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman yields back. The questions on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Virginia. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The noes appear to have it.
Mr. Chairman.
Gentleman from Virginia.
On that matter, then, I would request a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Virginia will be postponed. It's now in order to consider Amendment Number 7, printed in House Report 112-144. For what purpose? He's there. So we'll just go on to the next one. It's now in order to consider Amendment Number 8, printed in House Report 112-144.
Mr. Speaker.
For what purpose does the gentleman from Tennessee seek recognition?
I have amendment at the desks.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 8, printed in House Report number 112-144, offered by Mr. Cohen of Tennessee.
Read and considered, therefore,
without objection, the amendment will be considered as read pursuant to House Resolution 347. The gentleman from Tennessee, Mr. Cohen, and a member opposed. Each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Tennessee.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. While on this 4th of July most Americans were partaking in American pastimes like barbecuing and watching ball games, Montanans were immersed in a new American tradition, unfortunately, cleaning up an oil spill. In this case, Montanans were working and are still working feverishly to clean up 40,000-gallon leak from Exxon Mobil's Silvertip pipeline, a spill that is having a devastating impact on the residents, economy, and environment in the state of Montana. As written, this legislation opens the door for more destructive events like the Yellowstone spill. This is why I proposed a simple, zero-cost amendment that will resolve this issue and continue protecting the American people, its environment, our economy, our water system from the harmful effects of pipeline spills. The investigation of the Yellowstone spill has made it clear that the spill occurred because the pipeline was not buried deep enough below the stream bed. Having only been buried 5 feet below the river, years of the Yellowstone River's powerful flow removed much of the sediment covering the pipeline to the point where the pipeline was directly exposed. Once exposed, the pipeline was weakened by the elements rapidly moving down the Yellowstone River. In order to bury a pipeline beneath a stream bed, the company building the pipeline often has relied upon and applied to the Corps of Engineers for a permit to dredge and fill. While the Corps has the authority to issue the permit, EPA has the ability to exercise oversight and ensure that the pipeline is sited safely and buried appropriately. This oversight authority is an effective, non-burdensome safety feature of the permitting process that serves as a backstop to federal and state regulators and protects the health and safety of the American people. All this amendment does is ensure that this bill, does not prevent the Environmental Protection Agency from exercising this authority. It does not create a new permitting requirement or process. Historically, the siting of pipelines has not been an issue where the federal government has exercised much oversight. And this amendment does not call for an enhanced oversight, create a new process, or require anything more from pipeline owners or builders. Rather, it simply preserves the existing right of the Environmental Protection Agency to exercise oversight in egregious cases. Every piece of oil infrastructure, whether it's a pipeline or a drill rig, has backup safety features that are critical to ensure the safe operation of the infrastructure. Those safety backups, like the dead man switch on a drill rig, only function when the first set of safety valves features fail. The EPA's oversight of the Corps' dredge and fill permits for pipelines is just like the dead man switch on an oil rig. It is only there as a backup protection in case the Corps might fail. And if the oil industry uses layer upon layer of backup safety systems, why should the federal government not do the same? We are the ultimate protector of the water of our people. With the demand for oil in the United States increasing, more and more pipelines are being proposed. Many of these pipelines will cross economically critical, environmentally sensitive bodies of water like the Yellowstone River. Significant pipeline spills like the million-gallon Enbridge pipeline spill last year in Michigan are serious events that have real implications for real people. Just ask the citizens of Kalamazoo, Michigan, who almost a year later are still recovering from that spill. In order to avoid similar tragedies in the future, the federal government needs to retain the existing protections built into the permitting process. This amendment does that by just maintaining EPA's existing authority to protect the American people and ensure that our waters are not contaminated. I urge passage of this important safety amendment, which will ensure that our nation's pipelines are as consistent and as safe and reliable as Old Faithful, which resides in Yellowstone Park and whose river is being threatened. I yield back the remainder of my time and ask for support.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio rise?
Mr. Chairman, I wish to claim time in opposition, although I'm not opposed.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. EPA's role in regulating pipelines is minimal as compared to the role of other agencies. This bill would have little effect on the regulating pipelines. Therefore, we can accept this amendment. I yield my time.
Gentleman yields back. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Tennessee. Those in favor of the amendment say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the amendment is adopted.
Thank you, Speaker, and thank the gentleman for accepting the amendment.
It's now in order to consider amendment number 9, printed in House Report 112-144. For what purpose does the gentleman from Oregon seek recognition?
I seek recognition to offer the amendment on behalf of Mr. Markey.
Clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment number 9, printed in House Report number 112-144, offered by Mr. Blumenauer of Oregon.
Pursuant to House Resolution 347, the gentleman from Oregon, Mr. Blumenauer, and a member opposed each will control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Oregon for 5 minutes.
Thank you. I would yield myself 3 minutes.
The gentleman is recognized for 3 minutes.
This amendment ensures protection for waters and wetland that provide flood protection, are economically valuable habitats, or are coastal recreation waters. Healthy streams and wetlands provide vital public benefits for flood protection, commerce, and public health. And as there is an effort on the part of my friends on the other side of the aisle to eliminate these critical protections, it's important to keep that in mind. Pollution destroys habitat and cripples local fishing and tourism. There's been talk about economic development. Well, it costs money to deal with treating polluted waters. There are 40 million recreational anglers in America that generate $125 billion in economic output, including $45 billion in retail sales, and pay $16.4 billion in state and federal taxes. The sport supports over 1 million American jobs right here in the United States. And when a wetland is filled with sediment or drained, it can no longer protect towns from devastating floods. We've had witness over the last couple years of this devastating impact. An acre of wetland provides more than $10,000 per person in public benefits. And if you lose 1% of a watershed's wetland, it can increase flood volume by almost 7%. These are nature's sponges that we need to protect. It's also important to point out that not all states protect the quality of their water. Some states just simply don't care as much as other states. Some states are not as capable of protecting it. In those states where protection is lax, the EPA must have the authority to step in to protect the economy, the environment, and human welfare for residents in states in that state, as well as the states that are downstream that would also be affected. We shouldn't have Americans held hostage to the lowest common denominator of people who are simply not going to maintain the standard. This amendment preserves the authority for the EPA to protect communities who rely on water for fishing and other economic benefits, along with wetlands that create vital flood protection. Mr. Speaker, the American public strongly support clean water. This has been one of the most popular pieces of legislation since it was enacted in the Nixon administration. It, until now, has had pretty broad bipartisan support. The legislation here represents the most aggressive attack on it, in my memory, in 15 years in Congress. This amendment, at least, would clarify this particular item. I urge its adoption.
The gentleman reserves the balance of his time. For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio rise?
Mr. Chairman, I wish to claim time in opposition.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, I must strongly oppose this amendment because it basically aims to gut the underlying bill. This amendment is designed to ensure that the EPA can continue to unilaterally force its own one-size-fits-all federal policies onto the state's water quality programs. The underlying bill, H.R. 2018, reestablishes the state's balanced role in carrying out the provisions of the Clean Water Act, but this amendment, in effect, says that the underlying bill will not apply to virtually anywhere in the Clean Water Act applies. Implicitly, this amendment also says that the states cannot be trusted in protecting the quality of their waters and the health of their citizens, and the federal government knows best. Once states have approved clean water programs, they are capable of administering their programs and caring for the welfare of their citizens. EPA needs to be more respectful of the decisions made by the states in those circumstances. H.R. 2018 is a good bill that restores balance to an out-of-control U.S. EPA. The intent of this amendment is to make the bill completely unworkable, and I would also add that I think the Clean Water Act has worked until now, when the states have been usurped of their authority and ability to enforce the state and federal EPA law, environmental laws. I urge all members to oppose this amendment. I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from Oregon is recognized for 2 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. Speaker. I would yield 1 minute to my friend and colleague from Oregon, a gentleman who deeply understands the importance of this amendment.
The gentleman from Oregon, Mr. DeFazio, is recognized for 1 minute.
Well, the gentleman who just preceded me said this would gut the bill. He's right. It would gut this bill, which deserves to be gutted. This bill would take us back to pre-Clean Water Act standards. Now he says, oh, the states, if they have standards, they shouldn't be bothered by the EPA. Well, this bill says if a state has adopted standards on paper, but they choose not to enforce them and they're out of compliance, the EPA can take no action. It further says that if we discover a new harmful pollutant, as we did recently when we upgraded the standards for arsenic, most of us don't want our kids drinking arsenic in the water, the EPA cannot enforce new national standards if we discover a new dangerous pollutant unless the state agrees. It's optional. It's up to the state. And then, of course, if you happen to be a downstream state from a state that is choosing to kind of stick it to its own people by not adopting the highest standards or not even enforcing their existing standards, you're downstream. You don't have any choice. You have no recourse. This bill is absurd in terms of the fact that it is just designed to totally gut the Clean Water Act and turn back the clock to the good old days when we had rivers that burned. Thank you very much.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Oregon reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from Ohio.
Reserves the balance of my time.
The gentleman from Ohio reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from Oregon.
I would yield 1 minute to the distinguished gentleman from Long Island who has some experience with problems of water, pollution, and erosion.
The gentleman from New York is recognized for 1 minute.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I thank the gentleman for yielding, and I thank the gentleman for offering this amendment along with Mr. Markey and Mr. DeFazio. If H.R. 2018 were enacted as drafted, it would restrict the EPA's ability to protect the nation's waters from pollution. As we know, if pollution is allowed to increase due to the dueling interests of states, many sources of clean drinking water would be imperiled, valuable fish and wildlife habitat would be endangered, and coastal recreational waters like the shores of my Long Island would be at risk, along with all the economic benefits these resources provide. The Markey-DeFazio-Blumenauer amendment simply restricts the provisions of this bill from endangering waters that provide flood protection for communities, our valuable fish and wildlife habitat, or our coastal recreational waters that are the backbone of my district's economy. In fact, my district will face real economic danger if this bill is not amended, not to mention the environmental danger that my district and districts all over this country will face. I strongly urge my colleagues to support this amendment. I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman's time has expired. The gentleman from Ohio.
Mr. Chairman, I'd just like to comment from the comments from the colleague from Oregon, talked about a new pollutant. Well, under 2018, if there's a new pollutant out there that comes in and it's not in the state already approved plan, the state has to take action, and the EPA, they have to work cooperatively to develop a new plan to address that issue. So I think when the issue of arsenic came up, they'd have to work cooperatively to work that. And the comment about states, won't take action, I can't believe the state EPA is not going to take action. Oregon, maybe they're not going to take action in Oregon. It's hard for me to believe that, but I don't think this amendment is necessary, and I oppose the amendment. I yield my time.
The gentleman yields back his time. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Oregon. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The noes appear to have it.
Mr. Speaker.
Gentleman from Oregon.
On that, I would respectfully request a recorded vote.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Oregon will be postponed. It is now in order to consider Amendment Number 10, printed in House Report 112-144. For what purpose does the gentleman from Missouri seek recognition?
To speak on Amendment 10.
Does the gentleman wish to offer the amendment?
I wish to offer Amendment 10.
The clerk will designate the amendment.
Amendment Number 10, printed in House Report Number 112-144, offered by Mr. Carnahan of Missouri.
Pursuant to House Resolution 347, the gentleman from Missouri, Mr. Carnahan, and a member opposed will each control 5 minutes. The chair recognizes the gentleman from Missouri.
Thank you, Mr. Speaker. 2011 is already the costliest year for natural disasters in history. Over $250 billion in economic damages have already been incurred around the world. In the U.S. alone, storms, flooding, wildfires, and earthquakes have already done roughly $27 billion in damage, more than double the annual average over the last decade. Living near the confluence of our country's two greatest rivers, the Mississippi and the Missouri, my constituents in the St. Louis region have rebuilt from floods many times, and we understand the challenges facing communities across the nation during this unprecedented season of floods. Even after the cleanup has begun, flood-affected communities face the prospect of public health epidemic spread by dirty water, in effect creating a double crisis for communities already struggling to pick up the pieces. We've all seen the shocking images from cities large and small along the Mississippi this spring, and the last thing these communities need are weakened clean water standards that would put them at risk of waterborne diseases or even toxic chemicals. My amendment to H.R. 2018 would ensure that communities recovering from devastating floods would not be burdened by the public health threats posed by dirty water. It simply states that none of the provisions of H.R. 2018 would apply where the President has declared a disaster due to flooding within the past 5 years or to waters that have contributed to such a flood. This is a common-sense amendment. It will help reassure flood-affected communities that their water is safe and healthy. I urge my colleagues to stand up for flood-affected communities across the country by voting in favor of the Carnahan amendment. Mr. Chairman, I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves his time. For what purpose is the gentleman from Ohio?
Mr. Chairman, I wish to claim time in opposition to the amendment.
The gentleman is recognized for 5 minutes.
Thank you. Under Mr. Carnahan's amendment, if a state has made a disaster declaration any time in the last 5 years, H.R. 2018 would not be applicable to waters in the area. This amendment would continue to allow the EPA to overturn state-established and U.S. EPA-approved water quality standards and unilaterally impose federally dictated permitting and other regulatory requirements on states and other disaster responders. This, in turn, would impact on the ability of states and other disaster responders to respond to and conduct cleanups after major flood disasters and would discourage states from seeking disaster assistance. Mr. Chairman, I urge all members to oppose the Carnahan amendment, and I reserve the balance of my time.
The gentleman reserves the balance of his time. The gentleman from Missouri is recognized for 3 minutes.
Mr. Chairman, Mr. Speaker, we have no other speakers, so I yield back the balance of my time.
The gentleman yields back the balance of his time. Gentleman from Ohio.
Mr. Chairman, I yield my time.
The gentleman yields back his time. The question is on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Missouri. Those in favor say aye. Those opposed say no. No. The noes appear to have it.
And we'll like to request a roll call vote on that question.
Pursuant to Clause 6 of Rule 18, further proceedings on the amendment offered by the gentleman from Missouri will be postponed. For what purpose does the gentleman from Ohio rise?
Mr. Chairman, I move that the committee now rise.
The gentleman from Ohio moves that the committee of the whole do now rise. Those in favor of the committee rising say aye. Those opposed say no. The ayes have it, and the committee does now rise.
Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Speaker, the Committee of the Whole on the State of the Union, having had under consideration H.R. 2018, directs me to report that it's come to no resolution thereon.
Okay. The Chair of the Committee of the Whole House on the State of the Union reports that the committee has had under consideration H.R. 2018 and has come to no resolution thereon. Pursuant to Clause 12A of Rule 1, the House will stand in recess, subject to the call of the Chair.